Annyeonghaseyo, Ohayo gozaimasu, ni hao, neho, g'day. I'm Russell Matthews and I'm one of the pastors here at Gordon Baptist Church, and my responsibility is to come alongside parents and families along with other members of our team to strengthen and support your work and ministry to your children and youth. And it's been great to become part of the church community here. I've realised pretty quickly that we're a rather diverse group, and even our pastoral team is quite a diverse team. Let me illustrate this just by showing you their offices and comparing their offices to mine. Let me just show you Steve. G'day Steve, how you doing?
Good.
That's the way. Here's John.
Hi, Russell. Hello, everybody.
Surrounded, as you can see, by lots of books. That's Pastor Jen's office. And here is my office. So as you can see, I don't have many books because my books are all on my iPad. I'm a digital ebook pastor. And that shows you there's always differences, isn't there, in every team, as in every family, and in our church community. And I hope that we continue to value the differences that we bring to church. I think it makes church a richer, more interesting community when we value diversity. To complement our series, we're going to encourage everyone across the church, the four congregations, to read through the book of the Acts of the Apostles during the month of May. To do that, there will be information coming out via e-news as to how you can receive each day a passage to read. And as you read that passage, others in the church will also be reading the same passage, and together we'll be listening to what God has to say about our missionary life. Our missionary life has implications and benefits for parents and families. But parents, I want to encourage you to realize through this series, you are frontline missionaries. Every day you are living among persons who have been entrusted into your care who need to hear the gospel of Jesus. Every day is an opportunity for you as a frontline missionary to show and tell them about Jesus and how he changed your life and how he's still changing and influencing you as a person, as a parent. Secondly, I hope this series is a real challenge to all of us in all four congregations to be global people who think globally and act locally, who are aware that we are part of a worldwide international community and movement that Jesus founded 2,000 years ago and that is still growing and expanding. But to be practical and realize that where we are with the people we meet in our various relational spheres, there's opportunities for us to bring them into contact with this worldwide movement and with the one who started it all and who has, as I said, changed our life and is changing our world, and hopefully will change theirs. So we really hope that you're going to be encouraged by this series to become global people who think globally and act locally.
Gordon Baptist Church offers many ways which to support you, your family, friends and loved ones. Our website is the place to go to find information about these services and the available resources to connect us to the life of the church. There are resources for both adults and kids for use at home, including information to support the current series. If you are a regular member, you will find all the details about how to give online. Visit us at www.gordonbaptist.org.au.
Role reversal We're now living with our son and daughter-in-law and little baby, and so where I would have been the caregiver and the giver of hospitality, I'm now the receiver of that hospitality, which has been a real blessing to actually be on the other side. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but also a real enjoyment. Well, when we arrived in Sydney, the real estate market seemed very bleak for us. And we've just noticed in the last 2 weeks there's been an absolute total turnaround, and within 2 weeks we have an apartment. God has blessed us with a little home and just sorted everything out. So yeah, from being we're not able to buy anything, we suddenly have a beautiful little apartment. The Holy Spirit is saying trust and stop worrying. Our worrying does nothing. It really does nothing. And I think during this time where I was very worried about us getting a home and the current situation, I kept thinking about the verse, cast all your cares upon him because he cares about you. We have a God who cares. He's a God who cares about every detail of our life.
Hello. Today we're continuing our series, Our Missionary Life. As a church, we speak regularly about mission and frequently at this time of year during May. But remember, we are deliberately using this term missionary to speak about ourselves, not those whom we send across the globe as our partners in mission. For after all, every follower of Jesus is called to a life of mission. But I wonder how you feel when you hear this topic. I think if some of us are honest, it's a reaction something like, oh no, not this again. Or, I bet I end up feeling guilty at the end of this. Or, why don't they speak about something that's just a little bit more relevant, something that's achievable for me in my life? Why all this big picture, heavy theology? Do you ever have a little voice somewhere inside of you saying, I'm glad there are other people in our church who do amazing things in their lives. And we do have those people. People who have careers, vocations, where they are brilliant people doing amazing things. Or others who are incredibly motivated, speaking up as advocates for the poor and marginalised. There are some who always seem to be having conversations with their friends and family about Jesus and drawing them to faith in him. But what about stuff for normal people? People like me. I guess my inner self more readily identifies with those who struggle just to live an ordinary life. To be normal would be an achievement. But it's to people like that I want to speak today, because we also can have a missionary life. The way I want to speak about that today might seem a little bit strange to start, but hopefully it will make sense in the end. Connell and Marianne grew up in the same small town in the west of Ireland. In school, Connell is well liked and popular, whilst Marianne is a loner. But both of them share an undermining, poisonous sense that they aren't normal. They strike up an unlikely conversation, which is awkward but electrifying, and they end up becoming secret lovers. The pair weave in and out of each other's lives through their university years, developing an intense bond which brings to light the traumas and insecurities that make them both who they are. Their on-again, off-again relationship of mutual fascination, friendship and raw intimacy is shaped by this deep sense of wanting to be normal. But of course in that way they already are. Last week I read this story in a novel. It's called Normal People by Sally Rooney. In getting the picture for this PowerPoint, the book cover, I realised that they've made this into a telemovie that I believe starts streaming tomorrow. The actors in the previous picture were Connell and Marianne. But there was one part of the book that really jumped out at me when I read it. When they're in their early 20s, one of their school friends, called Rob, commits suicide. After the funeral, Marianne spends nights scrolling through Rob's Facebook page. Lots of people are leaving posts on his wall expressing their feelings about losing him from their life, how much they miss him. And this confuses and angers Marianne. She thinks, what on earth are these people doing writing things on the wall of a dead person? What do all these expressions, these advertisements of loss mean? And how do you respond to them? What's the etiquette? Do you like them? Rooney writes in such a way in her book that she reveals her character's self-understanding, allowing you to get inside their heads. What Marianne concludes as she reflects upon her anger, trying to understand why it unsettles her so much, reveals for her a deep, devastating sense of despair. A paralysing fear that I think many of us have and wrestle with. Rooney writes in such a way that she reveals her character's self-understanding, allowing you to get inside their heads. And what Marianne concludes as she wrestles with her anger, as she tries to understand what unsettles her so, conveys her devastatingly deep sense of despair, the paralysing fear that many of us wrestle with. Rooney writes this: thinking about it now, she can't understand why it bothered her. None of those people had done anything wrong, they were just grieving. Of course, it didn't make sense to write on his Facebook wall, but nothing else made sense either. If people appeared to behave pointlessly in grief, it was only because human life was pointless, and this was the truth that grief revealed. Is that true? Is that the truth we avoid, which grief reveals? Or is it untrue? Are our lives pointless? The character Rob had got to that point. Isolated and hopeless, and being unable to tolerate that pain any longer, he took his own life. Connell and Marianne are plagued by the sense that they are abnormal and useless in the world, and they continue in a descent into disorder. Marianne lets herself constantly be abused by others because she feels that's all that she's worth. Connell slides into a paralysing anxiety and depression, convinced that he will amount to nothing. Where will things lead to in this story? But more importantly, where will it lead to for us? It raises questions that I think we all face at some point in time. What does it really mean to be a normal person? What does a normal life look like? And what does our life achieve? Does it really amount to anything? Something that says our existence is meaningful and valuable. I want to suggest that our missionary life helps give an answer to that question, but only if it takes a particular shape. However, it's a shape that can be chosen by normal people because it's all about norming and normality. Choosing this particular life gives an answer both for us, for each of us, and also for other people, the Connells, the Robs, the Mariannes that we meet and know. There is a way of meaning and hope, even in the midst of chaos and loss. What Jesus calls us to, as he calls us to himself, is to embrace a life which can be chosen by very ordinary people. After all, they were the type of people that he first called to himself. But he called them to live a new normal way of life, out of which extraordinary things can happen. Think of a time that Jesus gathered his friends in a room to share a meal. That night, which we now call Maundy Thursday, Jesus gets them together in an upper room because they are about to face a time of profound loss, grief, and helplessness. It will soon appear to them that everything they have been living for now amounts to nothing, because the brutal death of Jesus will shatter all of their hopes. In his gospel story, in chapters 13 to 17, John writes about the direction and answer that Jesus gives them in that circumstance. This is Jesus' farewell address, where he explains to them what he has come to do, what his mission is all about, and what will happen after he is gone. In unpacking his mission, he wants these ordinary people to know how it will continue on through them. And so he will pray for them to that end in his consecrating or sanctifying prayer as he sends them out on mission. Look at where John starts this account, the very first verse in this unit, where he explains to us what this whole story is about. John 13:1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And look at where it ends in the final verse of Jesus' prayer in chapter 17. I have made you known to them and will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. The key answer for us in making a normal life, which is of lasting value, and therefore the particular shape of our missionary life, is to live a life of love. Love for God, love for people, love for one another. If you read all that comes in between these two verses, you'll see why it is that us living in loving unity with each other is the way of fulfilling Jesus' mission in the world, This is how we carry out his instructions and remain in him and his love as his friends. Can I suggest to you that when you finish listening to me, you take 10 minutes just to read through these 5 chapters and see what jumps out to you. Loving is how we will be fruitful in mission. He teaches us that we are to be like branches living in a vine, producing the fruit of his love. This will sustain our life and make us fruitful as we remain in him. We will reliably produce his loving fruit, the fruit of his life, as he continues his mission through us. Jesus himself did this as he remained in his Father and in his Father's command to love. Jesus says everything he's learned from his Father, he's made known to us. And this is the way he keeps leading us. This is why he will send his Spirit, who will accompany us in mission, who will go on ahead of us. This is why Jesus' command is always about love. We are to serve one another in loving service, like washing feet. Jesus recognises that this way is both normal and abnormal. He says this will be contradicted by the ways of the world, and therefore will bring hostility to us as it did for him. But we are not to give up in fear, to change from this way of life, because he says he has overcome the world. When Jesus says he is not of this world, what he means is he does not live in its ways. He loves the fallen world, which is why he came. It's why the Father sent the Son. But if we are to follow in the ways of Jesus, we will not be of this world either. We, unlike the world, are called to love all without discrimination, to love even the unlovely, even our enemies. This isn't how the world works. It's abnormal. This is why Jesus prays for us, that God will protect us as we live in this world. Be clear what Jesus means here. He's not saying that by following him we'll be protected from disease, disaster, or even death. God does not protect us in this way. Praying for and expecting that is really the heart of idolatry, turning God into a fetish to protect us from harm. The protection that Jesus says that we'll have as we follow him is that we will not be lost to him and his ways as we live in this world, as we go through these things. As we trust and obey his teaching, he will protect us from the evil one, who would tempt us to despair, to turn back and give up, to pursue non-Christ-like, non-loving ways. Jesus says this is the way he protected his first followers and lost none. Even Peter the denier, or Thomas the doubter, remained with him because of his protecting love to them. He lost none, he says, except for Judas, who was doomed from the start. We might ask, why would loving bring hatred? Well, it did for Jesus. People in power get angry when others stand up for justice, when they advocate for the poor, when they practice forgiveness, when they think there should be vengeance. Whether it's capital punishment for criminals or preemptive strikes and violent borders in the name of nationalism. Love confronts our selfishness, our lack of moral imagination, the lack of generosity of spirit. Jesus specifically says he doesn't pray for us to be taken out of this type of world, but that within it we would be set apart, made holy, sanctified, that is, to live for God and his purposes within this world. We do that together by living in a loving unity with each other. In this way, the church demonstrates the truth of the gospel, that the kingdom of God's love has indeed come from heaven to remake the earth. Just as the Father sent the Son, so he sends us. Our missionary calling is to live like Christ in a life of love. He promises that as we do so, we will share in his joy and glory. We'll be part of the relationship that he has with his Father, that intimacy where the Son lived in the Father and the Father lived in the Son. We will be included in that. And Jesus says, by this way, the deepest desires of our hearts will be fulfilled, because we'll be living in the way we were created to live, to love God and to love others. If you read these chapters in John, you'll see how interconnected these relationships are. We've spoken about our communion with God, our community with each other, and our commission in the world. All three are interconnected and overlap, but each of them is characterised by love. This is the normal life human beings were created for, and for which Christ is recreating us. That's what we are to evidence now, and that's how we'll share in his eternal delight when he comes in the fullness of his kingdom. Do you believe this enough to risk living in this way of love, to give your allegiance to it? This is the missionary life that we are called to, and as we live this way, We'll do at least 3 things as God reshapes and empowers us as we follow Jesus as Lord. We will announce the reign of God in Christ with words of loving truth. We will demonstrate the reign of God in Christ by actions, by living in loving justice. We'll embody the reign of God in Christ as we become like him, Christoformity, in ways of loving service. You might consider how you can live this way of love in your normal life now. Love is often shared in seemingly small, normal actions. It might be speaking up for a work colleague who was bullied, minding someone else's children to give them a break, phoning someone who is lonely just to say hello, being a peacemaker in your family where tensions bring hurt and harm, smiling at your neighbours as you pass them on the streets. Everyone's out walking these days. Deliberately sharing some beautiful music with a friend. As you do these things, remember why it matters and why what you do will remain. Living in this way, living for the kingdom, what you do is eternally valuable. It points us forward to that perfect kingdom of love. That's the destiny of the whole creation. As heaven fills earth, where the knowledge and glory of God fill all that there is as the waters cover the sea. This is the gospel story, the good news that we tell ourselves. This missionary life of love is our narrative identity. The story we tell about ourselves, not to each other, but to ourselves. This is our self-understanding of our life. The other week at Easter, I mentioned another book called Phosphorescence by Julia Baird. In it, she quotes Oliver Sacks in his intriguing work, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Sacks says this: "We have, each of us, a life story, an inner narrative whose continuity, whose sense is our lives. It might be said that each of us constructs and lives a narrative, and that this narrative is us, our identities." Connell and Marianne carried around in themselves a destructive narrative. The story of their lives, their identity, was not a good one. But the story of our lives, this life of missional love, is a generative story. It's creative, like the loving God who creates and makes things new. It's restorative, forgiving and reconciling, like the God who redeems. God is writing a new story in our lives as we live together with Jesus as Lord, and we see his life of lovely love formed in us. So our story can be honest, but not despairing. We can tell of our failures and struggles, not because it reveals a story of contamination and how bad we are, but because they point to his bigger story, which is reshaping us, reorientating us to seek the good, to seek lives of love. Our narrative is a positive story, a gospel of hope and of meaning. God is making us a people of love. Our story matters. The missionary life does not vanish. It is not meaningless. What we achieve is not lost to God. He recognises, remembers, values and uses it. It's all part of his story of redemption, the story that he is writing even as we speak, using our lives as part of his big and wonderful story. We'll sit down at another meal with Jesus and recount together all the characters and myriad details, things that we don't understand now. We'll sing as a saga of joy on that day. This is the story of the normal Christian life, our missionary life. We're part of the whole cosmos being recreated, a new normal, which is why it works for normal people now. It's therefore no surprise that in a novel that's not written as a Christian story, we see the power of love, this Christ-like love, transforming Connell and Marianne. And this is what happens at the end of their story. The tension of the narrative, what's driven the whole thing, is their mutual misunderstanding of each other, their hurting of one another, their fear, their insecurity. But they learn through a deepening practice of forgiveness and reconciliation what love is. That whole inner narrative is changed by that experience of being loved and loving one another. For Marianne, who was abused and unloved, and so kept drinking that poison that she was unlovable and abnormal, being loved means she no longer feels unworthy. She's no longer left alone in despair and self-contempt. Connell's love has given her security. And for Connell, who just as destructively thought of himself as abnormal because he never believed what he offered was any good to others, to see himself making a difference to another person's life by loving, he's seen that he can help others. He's confident now to go out into his world and make a difference. Marianne's affirming love sets him free. And this is the conclusion where Rooney writes to give us Marianne's understanding of all that they've experienced together. She says, "He brought her goodness like a gift, and now it belongs to her. Meanwhile, his life opens out before him in all directions at once. They've done a lot of good for each other. Really," she thinks, really, people can really change one another. This is what God does through us in his mission in the world, as he brings the love of Christ to us and through us. This answers the questions we raised at the start. This is the enduring legacy and the impact of normal lives of love. This is the great change that God brings. And this is how Christ continues his mission through us as we live our missionary lives.
Cross has overthrown the grave, for Jesus' blood that sets us free means death to death and life for me. The innocent judged guilty, while the guilty one walks free. Death would be his portion, and our portion liberty. Our chains are gone, our debt is paid. The cross has overthrown the grave, for Jesus' blood that sets us free means death to death and life for me. I give my whole life to honor this love. By the Lamb who was slain, I'm forgiven. The sinner's Savior, crown him forever. For the Lamb who was slain, he is risen. I give my whole life to honor this love. By the Lamb who was slain, I'm forgiven. The sinner's Savior, crown him forever. For the Lamb who was slain, he is risen. Our chains are gone, our debt is paid. The cross has overthrown the grave, for Jesus' blood that sets us free means death to death and life for me. Means death to death and life for me.
At the end of this stream, you'll be able to join a video chat via Zoom with others in the community, and the link to that chat will appear in the right-hand column where people have been chatting during this stream. That'll appear at the end. Click on that link and then you can join and share with others. Also, Maggie, one of our children's ministry leaders, is going to be holding a Zoom video conference at 11 a.m. To talk with children about what they've been doing during the holidays and to make sure that children are feeling connected as well. And she sent out a link to that Zoom meeting, an invitation, via a letter to parents and the e-news. So just be aware that that's happening at 11 a.m. and we do hope that families connect with Maggie and give the children the opportunity to talk to each other.